In 1807, a Russian ship vanished off the storm-racked coast of the Pacific, along with a map whispered to lead to something older than any empire. 150 years later, a forgotten tribe's secret began to unravel, and with it, the question no historian could answer. Who has been guarding the truth all this time? The Pacific roared that night in 1807, waves like black mountains rising and breaking against the wooden hull of the Russian brig Svetlana, each impact shaking her bones as if the sea itself wanted her gone. The wind howled through the rigging, tearing at sails already frayed from weeks at sea, while the moon hid behind a wall of storm clouds, leaving the crew to work in near darkness, guided only by the white flashes of foam and the shouts of their captain. Captain Alexei Voronov was no stranger to storms. He had seen the Bering Strait churn like boiling steel, and he had steered through the cruel ice of Kamchatka, but this storm felt different. The air carried a strange metallic tang, and the waves did not follow their usual rhythm. It was as though the sea itself had changed its nature, driving them relentlessly towards some unseen point on the horizon. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. Below deck, locked inside an iron-bound chest bolted to the floor, lay two things worth more than the ship itself: a collection of gold and jade artifacts traded from the far coasts of Asia, and a leather-bound map marked in both Russian and cryptic symbols unknown to any of the crew. Only Voronov and his first mate, Yuri Sokolov, knew its origin. It had been entrusted to them in whispers, along with a warning that the map's path led to something older than the Tsars and more dangerous than any war. The chest had been reinforced with extra iron bands, though Voronov knew that no lock or metal would matter if the ocean claimed them. He had caught Yuri staring at it more than once, not with greed, but with the unease of a man who feared what he was carrying. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. The crew, 21 men hardened by cold seas and lean winters, worked frantically on deck. Sergei, the youngest, clung to the rigging with white knuckles, his face pale as he tried to haul in a line whipped loose by the wind. "She's fighting us, Captain," he shouted over the storm. "The current's wrong." Voronov felt it too. The swells weren't pushing them away from the coast, they were drawing them in, pulling them toward a dark, jagged shape barely visible through the mist. The coastline loomed like the wall of a fortress, cliffs crowned with a dense forest that swayed violently under the storm's assault. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. Lightning tore across the sky, revealing for an instant what lay ahead, a narrow cove where waves smashed against black rock, and above it, the faintest glow of firelight. It could have been lightning reflected, or the last embers of some distant signal, but it flickered with a steadiness that was human. "Land!" shouted the lookout, though his voice carried no relief. Land, in a storm like this, meant only one thing: danger. Voronov gripped the wheel. "Hold her steady," he bellowed above the wind. But the sea did not listen. With a deep, splintering crack, the Svetlana struck something beneath the waves, reef or rock, and the deck tilted violently. Men shouted as barrels and ropes tumbled across the planks. A mast snapped with a sound like cannon fire, crashing into the water and dragging part of the rigging with it. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. The cries of the crew were swallowed by the storm. Voronov caught one last glimpse of Yuri, hauling at the chest below deck as seawater surged in, before a wall of black water swept over the bow. He thought he heard the shattering of wood and the groan of the hull breaking apart, but then the cold seized him, dragging him down. In that final moment before the sea claimed him, he saw again the dark coastline, the forest looming over it, and that strange, steady glow like a single eye watching from the shore. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. In the weeks and months that followed, scattered reports drifted into trading posts and port towns along the west coast. Fishermen claimed to have found fragments of Russian timber washed ashore, carved with unfamiliar symbols. Trappers told of finding coins unlike any minted in the Americas, bearing the double-headed eagle of the Russian Empire. Some swore they had seen strangers in the deep interior, men with fair hair and blue eyes, dressed in the furs and tools of local tribes, speaking in a tongue no one could place. But no trace of the Svetlana, its crew, or its cargo was ever confirmed. The official record simply read, "Lost at sea. Presumed all hands perished." And for 150 years, the Pacific kept her secret. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. The silence broke in the summer of 1957. Historian Daniel Whitaker arrived in a remote coastal town in the Pacific Northwest with a notebook, a camera, and an obsession with maritime mysteries. He had come to research trade routes between Russian settlements in Alaska and the lower coasts, but his attention shifted instantly when, during a visit to a small tribal community inland, he was shown an artifact, a small jade figurine, worn smooth by time, depicting a bird in flight. The lines were precise, the craftsmanship delicate. It was unlike anything native to the region, yet Daniel had seen its twin before, drawn in an 1810 inventory of cargo believed to have gone down with the Svetlana. "Where did this come from?" he asked the elder who presented it. The old man's gaze was steady as he answered, "It was given to our people when the sea tried to take strangers, and the forest kept them instead." For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. Intrigued, Daniel lingered. He walked the beaches at low tide, combing through driftwood and seaweed for any trace of the past. On the third day, he found it, a shard of wood partially buried in black sand, its surface etched with faint Cyrillic letters worn by salt and time. He brought it to his colleague, linguist Margaret Albright, who traced the grooves carefully. "It's part of a name," she said, squinting in the light. "Svet, something. Could be Svetlana." Daniel felt a shiver of recognition. If the wood was from the lost ship, it meant the wreck might be close, and if the wreck was close, then perhaps the treasure and the mysterious map had not been lost to the deep after all. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. What unsettled him most was the way the local community spoke, or rather, refused to speak, about the wreck. When he asked about unusual finds or old stories, eyes shifted away, conversations stalled, and elders changed the subject. The secrecy was not born of ignorance but of choice. One night, over a small fire outside the elders' cedar plank home, Daniel asked directly, "If the Svetlana came ashore here, why is there no story of it in the history books?" The elder stirred the embers with a stick, his face lit in flickering orange and shadow. "Some truths," he said slowly, "are not written in books because the earth has claimed them. And if the earth holds them, it is for a reason." The flames cracked, sending a spray of sparks into the night, and Daniel knew then that he was chasing more than a lost ship, he was chasing a secret that someone had guarded for over a century and a half. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. Daniel could not shake the elders' words. They clung to him like the salt in the air, seeping into his thoughts until every step he took along the coastline felt heavier, as if the earth itself was testing him. The next morning, he returned to the black sand beach where he had found the fragment of the Svetlana. This time, he walked farther north, past a line of jagged rocks that locals claimed was impossible to cross at high tide. On the other side, the sand gave way to a stretch of driftwood so dense it looked like the skeleton of a forest that had drowned long before memory. Among the tangled logs, something caught his eye, another piece of timber, but unlike the others, this one was carved. The edges were smoothed by water, but he could see the faint outline of a double-headed eagle. The symbol of the Russian Empire. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. He took the timber to the same elder who had shown him the jade figurine. The man studied it for a long time, running his fingers over the carving as if feeling for something beneath the wood. "This," the elder said quietly, "has not seen the sun for many winters. It should have stayed where the sea left it." His tone was not angry, but weighted with meaning. Daniel asked if there were more pieces inland. The elder's eyes lifted to the dark forest beyond the village, then dropped again. "Follow the river that runs without sound. But know this, some waters do not lead you where you expect to go. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. The river was unlike any Daniel had seen. Its surface moved sluggishly, muffled by thick mats of moss and overhanging branches that choked the light. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became, until even the ocean's roar was gone. Hours passed before he found the first unnatural sign, a cairn of stacked stones at the river's edge, each stone etched with lines so fine they looked like scratches from a blade. Kneeling, he traced the markings and realized they were Cyrillic letters, initials, perhaps, or fragments of words. Some had been worn almost smooth, but others remained sharp, as though carved in different years. He photographed each one, his heart pounding with the possibility that survivors had left these as markers, breadcrumbs to something hidden further inland. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. By late afternoon, the forest opened into a narrow meadow where the grass swayed in a wind he could not feel. In the center stood a totem-like carving, taller than a man, depicting a bird with outstretched wings. Unlike the jade figurine, this bird's eyes were inset with small, polished stones, one green, one black. Around the base were objects half buried in moss, fragments of iron nails, a piece of porcelain, and what looked like a brass button stamped with a small anchor. He brushed away the soil and found, beneath it, a rusted clasp that might have once belonged to a sea chest. The sight sent a chill through him. If these objects had survived, they might have belonged to the crew of the Svetlana. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. Daniel heard movement behind him. He turned, half expecting an animal, but instead found a young man from the tribe watching him silently from the tree line. The boy said nothing, only stepped forward, picked up the brass clasp from Daniel's hand, and placed it back into the moss as if returning it to a resting place. Then he walked away without a glance back. The message was clear, these were not things to be taken. Daniel remained there for a long time, staring at the green and black eyes of the carved bird, feeling as though he had just crossed an invisible line into a story that was not his to tell. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. That night, in his rented cabin, Daniel spread out the photographs of the stone cairn and the carving in the meadow. Patterns began to emerge. The initials in the cairn matched letters found in Russian naval rosters from 1807. He couldn't prove it, but he felt certain. Some of the Svetlana's crew had reached land, survived, and left these signs as proof. But why no record? Why no tales passed down in coastal towns of shipwrecked sailors joining the life of the land? The only explanation was the one the elder had hinted at. Someone had made a choice, long ago, to keep the truth buried. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. The next morning, Daniel woke to find a small bundle placed on his doorstep. Inside was a strip of leather wrapped around a narrow piece of wood. On the wood was carved the same double-headed eagle he had seen on the driftwood, but this time, beneath it, was a spiral symbol he didn't recognize. Alongside the bundle was a scrap of paper with a single line in neat handwriting, "Some truths wait in the mountains." For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. The words on the paper stayed with Daniel as he packed his gear the next morning. Some truths wait in the mountains. He traced the spiral symbol carved beneath the double-headed eagle on the wooden piece and wondered if it was a map, a seal, or a warning. The mountains inland rose like a jagged wall against the horizon, their peaks hidden in drifting clouds. Locals had told him that beyond a certain ridge, trails disappeared and compasses turned unreliable, as if the land itself resisted being mapped. That was where he would go. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. The first day's climb was slow. The forest grew denser as the path narrowed, roots twisting across the ground like coiled ropes. By midday, Daniel found a place where the river he had followed earlier vanished beneath a curtain of rock, spilling into an underground channel. Beside it, he noticed another cairn of stones, but unlike the others, this one was topped with a shard of porcelain so clean and unweathered it seemed impossible for it to have been here for 150 years. When he picked it up, he saw a faint blue mark painted along its curve, a fragment of a design that matched Russian export porcelain from the early 1800s. He set it back exactly as he had found it, uneasy at the thought that someone had placed it there recently. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. By the second day, the forest began to thin, giving way to slopes of stone and patches of alpine meadow. In one such clearing, he came upon something extraordinary, a low wall of stacked rocks running in a precise line across the slope. Embedded in its base were pieces of timber, clearly shaped by human hands, though darkened with age. On one plank, just visible beneath a layer of lichen, was the same spiral symbol from the wooden token he'd been given. This was no accident, someone had built this deliberately, marking the mountains with the same sign that had followed him since the beach. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. Near dusk, Daniel reached a ledge that looked down into a small basin. There, nestled between two ridges, was a structure unlike anything he had seen in the region. It was part cabin, part longhouse, built from logs but reinforced with stones in a way that seemed both practical and ceremonial. Smoke rose faintly from a vent in the roof, carrying with it the scent of cedar. He watched from the tree-lean until the door opened and an old woman stepped out, her hair silver and braided, her clothes a mix of traditional patterns and weathered leather. She stood for a long time, scanning the slopes as if expecting someone, before returning inside. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. When Daniel finally approached, the door opened before he could knock. The woman looked at him with calm, unblinking eyes. Without a word, she gestured for him to enter. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the smell of herbs. Against one wall sat a chest, old, iron-banded, its surface scratched but intact. Daniel's heart pounded. It was the same size and shape as the one Voronov had locked away on the Svetlana over a century ago. The woman spoke in a low voice, her words measured and deliberate, switching between her own language and fragments of Russian. Daniel understood only parts of it: ship, storm, forest kept, oath. She placed her hand on the chest, then on the wooden token he carried. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. With a slow, deliberate motion, she opened the chest. Inside was no glittering treasure, no piles of gold. Instead, wrapped carefully in cloth, was the leather-bound map that had vanished with the Svetlana. The edges were cracked, the ink faded, but the symbols, those strange, spiraling marks, were still sharp. Beside it lay the jade bird figurine he had first seen in the village, as well as tools, beads, and small carvings that clearly belonged to the crew. The woman pointed to the map and said one word in Russian: guard. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. Daniel realized then that the tribe had not merely found survivors, they had taken them in, hidden them, and absorbed their story into their own, ensuring that the map and its promise never fell into the wrong hands. Whatever the map led to, the oath to protect it had survived for 150 years. The woman closed the chest and placed the key on top, but did not offer it to him. Instead, she pointed toward the door, her eyes neither angry nor welcoming, simply resolute. The message was clear: he had seen enough. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold. As he descended the mountain the next day, Daniel carried no artifacts, no proof, only the memory of what he had seen. Back in the coastal town, the elder who had first shown him the jade figurine was waiting. Without preamble, the old man asked, "Did you find the truth?" Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "No. I found a story, and I think it's better that it stays where it is." The elder nodded, as if this was the only right answer. In that moment, Daniel understood: some treasures are not meant to be claimed, and some maps are not meant to be followed, because the value lies not in possession, but in the promise kept through generations. For more hidden stories where history meets mystery, subscribe to Natives Untold.